Hi, this is Paul. I want to do a video about us, whatever us is, and how we change, and how society is moved, and how our language sort of imagines things are moved. Now, I want to begin with just a tiny little snippet from this absolutely outstanding conversation between Paul Anleitner and Dr. Chris Green. Now, Chris Green, of course, I've done some commentary on his Jesus and John Wayne stuff. This conversation was just an outstanding conversation. So what I'm about to point out is in no way intended to take away from the absolutely wonderful conversation, because what Paul is about to say has everything to do with our assumptions about how the world changes, how we change the world, and in a sense, what runs the world. So basically I just finished making my video about the Christian Reformed Church and confessions and a whole bunch of nerdy things about CRC polity. And so I was just listening to some videos as I was copying links and doing the thumbnail and doing all of this stuff. And then Paul says this, and I thought, I have said this many times myself. This is, remember when I said in a previous video before, there's sort of this script. You put a TV camera in somebody's face. It might be a tragedy. It might be this tragedy that happened in Nashville, or it could be a tragedy that maybe a storm comes through and there's a flood, or some tragedy happens. You put the camera in front of someone's face and they spit out a script. It's not a script that they sat down and wrote out before. No, it's not a script they sat down in order to teach. No, this is a script that principalities and powers have handed to us. We have internalized it, and this is sort of the mindless code that we run on. And so, again, I mean absolutely nothing against my friend Paul Anleitner, and this should not in any way take anything away from this really tremendous, well worthwhile conversation that the two of them had. But when Paul said this, it's just clicked in me with some of the other things that I'll show you in a minute.
You know, if we could at least in America have a realistic conversation on the just war and nonviolence, and pull Christians away from this predominant notion, at least in my lifetime, has been this myth of aggressive, holy wars.
Yes.
To me, that's a win. And so if the pacifists and the just war theorists can't even get along to realize, hey, can we at least move people in the direction away from holy war? Then to me, that's a loss. And to me, this might be a similar question is like,
now what he just said there, can we, if we can have a conversation, and I say that all the time. Okay. This is the script that we have been given. And if you go all the way back to the beginning of the video, I believe it's on the teaser. Let's see if it's the teaser.
We weren't allowed to watch television in my house. We didn't go to the movies. So it wasn't until I was, in college that I started actually tracking the films that I talk about in the book. But even though we weren't allowed to watch them, they still somehow reached us, right? John Wayne was a figure that was present in my childhood and in our churches, even though supposedly none of us were watching him or following or had followed his career. But he truly was larger than life. I mean, he's one of those handful of figures, kind of Mount Rushmore of pop culture icons for middle America, white working class folks in middle America. Like, he was a defining figure. I don't think I've read anything that does justice to just how convoluted and entangled what you're calling values are in those narratives. Mm-hmm. And I think that's because I think the Western is the American story. It's the story Americans tell themselves, or at least it's the story that Americans in the positions of cultural dominance tell themselves about who they are. And because of that, it's so compact and it's so entangled that I don't know that it is possible, right, to pull apart all of the ways in which different values are at work at the same time, right? In many ways, contradictory values are at work at the same time. And it's part of the energy of those stories and the power of them is that they're stories that are holding together more than a story should be able to hold together. And this is why, I think Dumay's book was an important book. I mean, she raised crucially important issues, provoked a serious conversation that had been needed for a long time.
Yes.
But I don't think her account does anything like justice to the stories themselves, right? And to the ways in which those stories work in popular imagination.
Okay, so there's a teaser. And when I heard that teaser, it's like, I'm in. I mean, couple of ideas right out of that. Number one, he grows up and he's not allowed to watch John Wayne. Now, he'll talk before about how his father went and fought in Vietnam, went right from the war into police work in North America. They do quite a bit of talk about police work. He talked about how the trauma of the war, his parents broke up, like, I don't know how they had time to, maybe he was conceived out of wedlock, I don't know, but they were only married for a number of weeks, and they broke up because the guy, you couldn't live with the guy, and he loves his father. And so watch the whole video. The whole conversation is absolutely tremendous. The second part being that these narratives have so much in them. They're so compact. That's the only way to actually contain this stuff. I've long said that narratives are like a compression algorithm. There's so much in there. You can't just sort of pull it out propositionally or procedurally and just say, well, there it is, there it is. You can't reduce it. It's just so packed. And then Paul's comment, we need to have a conversation. Obviously, with Nashville, one side wants to have a conversation about what's happened in terms of the family or sexual morality. Another one wants to have a conversation in terms of guns or mental health, and all this wanting to have conversations. And the conversations just don't go anywhere. Now, I've been going through the Peterson Exodus series, and at one point in one of the episodes, I think it's episode 5, Peterson goes into and I'm not going to try and, because it's not on YouTube, I don't have access to the transcripts. And because I don't have access to the transcripts, I can't sort of easily find the place in it. So once they get to YouTube, I can search the transcripts and find the place and, grab the stuff. But Peterson makes the point that Hitler and Germany sort of co-generated each other, because Peterson makes the point that, like a comic who has a set, and Peterson uses that example, who goes to club after club after club, musicians do the same thing. They try the set and they see what lights up the crowd. That's sort of divination, as it were, because you try something and you look for the response. You try something, you look for the response. And now the response comes from this embodied group. The individuals, it turns them on. They're full of enthusiasm and they respond. But again, this isn't a conscious response where it's proposition, oh, this is along the lines, I'm going to respond to this. No, the coding is far deeper. It's far more cohesive. It's far more integrated. It's far more everything. So they're having this debate in the Exodus series. Why Germany? Germany, it sort of was the peak of civilization, as it were. They had the best scientists, they had the best theologians, they were a deeply Christian country, all of these things. And then they, in the course of the 20th century, they absolutely wreck themselves. I mean, the First World War and the aftermath of the First World War just destroys them. And so Peterson's contention, and to me it sounds like a very plausible thesis, is that Hitler just sort of goes around speaking, and if you listen to The Rest is History, the rise of the Nazis, they did an excellent multi-part session on them. Prager, Peterson has obviously studied this stuff in depth. Basically, Hitler gets his script together, and he figures out how to rally the people and rally the crowd. And Prager is right that Hitler never won an election where he had the majority of Germans vote for him. But yet there was a sense in which all of the stuff that was beneath the surface in Germany and Hitler and all of that history sort of co-generates into the Holocaust. And this gives us a sense of spirituality, of spirits, of how we work in this sphere. Now, Grim on his live stream this morning played a clip from Nechama. I didn't even know she had a YouTube channel. And this video is actually a few months old. And she talks about spirits and narratives sort of passing through that very much connected with what Chris Green said about the fact that he didn't even have set. He didn't even have television. And bang, John Wayne gets into him. And Nechama is talking about porn and how porn flows through. And
what we do if we, I think, sort of, if a narrative gets pulled into us, or we accept a narrative, let's say through the suggestion of others or an outside, like set, right? If we accept that suggestion, what happens, because narrative is a template, and again, I'm probably not using these words the same way everybody's, but stop with the disclaimers. Low expectations. If we...
You're doing great. Keep going.
Let me use my language. Narrative transfers from one area of your life to another, right? So you can pull it in from one area. You cannot, it's,
Stories live inside you.
You can't watch porn and then just compartmentalize it. The narratives that you intake, I believe, then, or the spirits, which is actually kind of worse, play out in other areas of your life. Now the question is what spirits do you want to play out in your life? And what narratives do you want to play out in your life? So I'm not making...
This is the strangest makeup video possible, I suppose.
There is one more point she makes. I don't know what it is. I'll get back to it shortly. You can, if you're looking for a link to Nechama's channel, you can find it in our discussion of that Telegram. And I'm also going to drop their link thing after. Back over here.
Okay, me watching me. We won't do that. Chad eventually comes onto the channel, and more of this.
And there's, I believe, really no getting away from that. It's this concept of like spiritual, right? Sometimes secular people will talk about the word spiritual. You know, because I'm not a practicing religious Jew, sometimes people ask me about my, how do I... And to those people, sometimes I tell them I'm a spiritual person, but I always kind of laugh inside a little because
I didn't check the rest of it. The point about me and Chad being right was really the thing. And there's the other guy, or ex, and the point that she was agreeing.
Anyway, it was a good live stream this morning. So then as I was making my thumbnail, before I saw the Paul Anneitner thing about the conversation, I've been mulling over Peterson's talk about sort of Germany and Hitler sort of co-generating this morning, coming across Grim Grizz's and Nechama's comments and thinking, yeah, that's very true. Narrative flows through us. Narrative flows through culture. You might never see John Wayne, but it's going to happen. And then, of course, the algorithm. There's many videos that could step in here, but what do you mean? That's a video about Mr. Beast. Mr. Beast has one of the largest YouTube channels. It's basically a game show channel. I didn't know anything about Mr. Beast's channel, but I didn't know anything about his background. And then, well, this was interesting.
With currently over 130 million subscribers. But what you probably didn't know is that he initially began his YouTube journey with aspirations of using his platform to spread the gospel message found in the Bible. His beliefs can be traced back to before his YouTube channel began. Jimmy Donaldson, now known as Mr. Beast, describes himself as having an obsessive personality, with his first obsession being...
Now he goes through a bunch of this history, how he loved baseball, and then his early then he's got an obsessive personality, so then he went into YouTube, and a lot of his early thumbnails
for his YouTube channel since he created it, and you can quickly notice that almost all of them were Christian inspired. Most of them showed a cross or a Bible verse, or even had quotes of him saying that he isn't ashamed of the gospel of Christ. It didn't take long for his subscribers to acknowledge the boldness that he had in declaring his faith. I really love that you are not ashamed of showing people that you are a follower of Christ. I really love how almost all of them have Bible verses, which is really cool because it's hard to find a good YouTuber that is a Christian and has great content. Keep up the good work.
As opposed to all the Christians who have crappy content.
Keep uploading. You're an inspiration to so many people. And proving that he still identified with being a Christian, he replied with, "Thank you for watching me, and I will always show my faith somehow on this channel. I am..."
Always. And you can kind of know where this goes. His channel rises, and then he goes on Logan Paul.
In Jesus.
I'm not religious.
All inside of one app. And the best part is, if you sign up right now,
I got the commercial. There you go. All right, you got some free, you got some free PVK love there.
He no longer believed in Jesus.
I'm not religious.
At all?
No, I'm not.
What about that Jesus?
No.
You say no.
Yeah, like,
Are you atheist?
You just asked the same question different ways. The answer's the same.
Atheist or agnostic?
Agnostic. Like, I mean, the universe is complex, and like, it's hard to believe someone didn't do it, but like, I don't know, there's a lot.
And given his history in promoting Christianity on his YouTube channel, he was also asked about his beliefs on the Flagrant podcast in 2022.
Is it true that your old YouTube banner used to be like a Bible verse?
It did. I used to go to a Christian school back in the day.
Oh, yeah.
But now it's like, it's just kind of hard to tell what's right or what's wrong, like religion-wise. There's so many, and I don't know. I believe...
Well, if you believe Reuters, of course, Christian school makes people want to do heinous things.
There is some
I went to Christian school all my life.
kind of God, but how do you know?
But no longer believing in Christianity left Mr. Beast without the assurance that there was indeed life after death. He now had a deep-seated fear of dying that his new beliefs seemed to be incapable of helping to resolve.
You afraid of death, by the way?
Yes, it's hard because, like, what if you just die and then you just see nothing forever, you know?
Yeah, the nothingness.
It just fades to blackness, and you're just like that for trillions upon trillions to billions squared.
And this gets into the whole thing of, well, it's conscious nothingness, or
years, and it's scary. But also, before you're born, you don't remember those X amount of years either. That gives me a little comfort, but no, it's definitely very scary. Something I'd rather not think of.
And so then, you just have to ask, well, why did Mr. Beast not become a Christian? I remember this conversation between Tony Campolo and his son, who became this humanist chaplain at Harvard, I think, for a while, Bart Campolo. And one of the things that Tony Campolo sort of tags him with is, well, you stopped going to church. And, so you have the participatory and the perspectival, and I mean, all of this stuff is together, but we very much do co-generate as we get older. These narratives flow through us. We get reinforcement, and we get reinforcement with certain things, and then we go there. We get reinforcement from certain things, and then we go there. And then this video is still rolling around in my mind.
I changed my mind about God. I was wrong. So accordingly, in this video, I want to share with you what I used to believe, what I believe now, and what made me change my mind along the way. And also, very importantly, I want to share with you a few thoughts of mine that I have that will help us bring more God not only into our lives, but also the world around us, which seems like it needs a lot more God right now. Because I don't know about you, but living in a world where Satan reigns and you and I and our families have to suffer the consequences doesn't really feel appealing to me. And also, quick disclaimer, this video is not intended to be a comedy video. And if that offends you, pray about it. So what I used to
Now, what was so amazing about this video is that whereas likely youthful Mr. Beast loses his faith, probably like many other YouTubers, being immersed in this world of chasing YouTube fame and stardom and money. And Mr. Beast has been an extraordinarily successful YouTuber. Awakening with JP hasn't been anywhere near as successful. I don't know how many subs his channel has. 2.8 million, way more successful than this guy right here, obviously. But he comes to a position where he practically sounds like basically someone who might go to a conservative evangelical church, but not too hidebound. His language, I found the video very, very interesting, just theologically in terms of his ideas. And so here, in some ways, he's sort of an autodidact Christian. He's very much piecing things together, and he's got some of his other things is more, what can I call them? New agey ideas from the past, and now it's sort of in a conservative wrapper. And again, probably in some ways, you could talk about audience capture, but he's sort of, I think probably a lot of Christians have watched him and listened to this and thought, and he got to know a bunch of people who are conservative Christians, maybe Mormons, and just people who are sort of nominally Christians out there in that way that there's a significant population in the United States are, whether or not they go to church all that frequently, whether or not they have a lot of theological knowledge. But as sort of, almost listening to him, you hear something that you might have heard, let's say, in the late 60s, early 70s, not in terms of the Jesus Revolution or that, but more in terms of, he has a long section in this about communist, which was really interesting, because even though there's a lot of conversation about Marxism and wokeness, communism as such, communism really doesn't have a lot of good instantiation in the world. I mean, to what degree are the Chinese still communist? Not very much. Even Cuba. It's just, hard times for the communists, but much more this because many of the people who are woke still want to get rich and live in a nice house. And it's hard to say eat the rich and then be one. And then at some point, so I didn't even look at this video before, but of course the algorithm pulled it up. Then the Christians sort of run through their scripts.
To judge whether something is true or not based on the errors of the followers. I would make the same argument with somebody like Ravi Zacharias. We all know the scandal with that situation. Did that then make everything that Ravi said wrong? You see what I mean? It's like we equate with what's true based on the person that says it. And the only person we should base that truth on is Jesus Christ.
But at the same time, all these narratives are flowing through. And so to get back to, let's say, the video where I started, where you're having a very sophisticated conversation about, they're not using this language, even though they both come out of fairly Pentecostal backgrounds, that these spirits are working through the world. Now, I don't think either of them would deny using that word, but it's also the case that they are also sort of established in a theological communities, and maybe out on YouTube they won't talk about spirits that much. I think in some ways this little corner is sort of pushing through to the other end. And when we talk about spirits, we're not sort of hearing each other talk about it in, let's say, a way that Christians usually talk, but we're talking about it within the context of all of our other conversations about what on earth do we mean by spirits. Now, none of this leads to some sort of easy solution for how you're going to remake the world in your own image. I spent the morning in the tire store getting some tire work done on my car, and there was a commercial that came on the television in the tire store, and it was all about, did you know that how many different people get their main source of news not from set but from video on demand? Therefore, get your message on video on demand so you can basically be a part of people's news feeds, etc., etc., etc. The real question that we should be asking is, what on earth is shaping us? And what does that mean? And it has to do with who we desire to impress, how we spend our time, what stories we not only consume, as it were, but desire to inhabit. So, again, I feel a little bit bad sort of teeing off on my friend Paul's comment, which again is part of just this normal script we inhabit. And it forces us to recognize that having a conversation about any issue that you somehow think is important might not be pointless or futile, but we are shaped so much by what took Mr. Beast away from Christianity and what's sort of given JP now his
We're
ideas.
Opening up a tube.
Oh, and this just fascinated me.
Situation. So I believe when we pray, we're opening up a tube to directly connect from God and bring God into the space over which we're praying. We're bringing oxygen where it's needed.
It's not a horrible metaphor. And theologically, you could ask some real questions about, well, how on earth... I mean, again, God, in that sense, sort of is like the super thing in the sky, which I've talked about before. I mean, it's not my point to sort of troll Christian YouTubers in how they sort of conceptualize this. I was very happy for oh no, I gotta find it again. Oh, this one. I was very happy for learning about Mr. Beast, and then he basically goes into a pretty standard Christian message, and it's sort of this direct message forward. Well, here's all the words, and I think so often what that approach does is everyone's already sort of in the tribe. It reinforces it. It's not a bad thing, but what has happened to Mr. Beast is so far beyond sort of straightforward propositional assertion and rational argumentation. It has everything to do with his formation and everything to do with the community and everything to do with the narratives that are sort of flowing through him. So this video has gone on long enough. And, Mark Lefebvre says I should make shorter videos, and he's probably right. And I've got other things I need to do. So we'll see if this video is of any value at all, but there it is. So I'll look forward to your comments, which either come in the comments section or probably through the Grim Grizz channel or how many other channels that are circulating the hive mind of this little corner of the internet.